Hello, everyone, and welcome to our week 2 of leadership and management. I am very happy to be with you again for another week, and I hope that so far you are enjoying the material, the course, and the discussions, and even the assignments. Okay, so again, if you have any questions, I know some of you have reached out with questions, which is great. If you have any questions, please reach out either via email or to my phone, my WhatsApp, where I can respond to you very quickly. All right? All right, so this week we continue talking about leadership and management, mostly leadership, although we do make some comparisons with management because they go hand in hand, right? Here, I want to just begin today's lecture with a quote from John Quincy Adams, sixth President of the United States. And President Adams wrote that if your actions inspire others to dream more, to learn more, to do more, and to become more, you are a leader. And I think it's important that we begin today's lecture with this quote because I want to make sure that we are turning off that switch of thinking that leadership is a position or a role, a specific role, or an authority figure, or even a person, or an office. Right? Obviously, the president of the United States is in a leadership position now. Should he be a leader? Should she hopefully one day be a leader? Yes, of course. That is inherent in the position. It requires that. But the fact that you are the president doesn't automatically make you a leader, nor does you being elected a public official or a director of planning, urban planning, or the head of your baseball team. It doesn't make you a leader. It just gives you a position of authority, a position of power, a position of influence where you should develop into a leader, be a leader, and become a leader if you, with time. But it doesn't automatically make you that, okay? All you need to be a leader is, as President John Quincy Adams said, was that all you need to do is inspire others to be more, to do more, okay? To dream more. And that's sufficient for you to be a leader. And that's what leaders do. They inspire, they motivate, they take individuals and guide them to achieve great things that they could not otherwise have achieved on their own, okay? So we'll start with that thought. All right, let's jump into the readings and the videos. All right, so for this week's readings, we have the Van Wart textbook. Please notice citations throughout the chapters, okay? So we have chapter 4, chapter 5. Then we have the Doble textbook, and that one talks about public leadership ethics. So read chapters 1 and 2 on that one. And then chapter 3, acting with integrity, okay? Public integrity. What do we mean by domains of judgment? What are some of the threats to integrity? And for example, how can rigidity and silence threaten integrity? This is why it's so important that we have the proper channels in organizations, in institutions, public institutions specifically, where individuals can voice their concerns and freely and without any fear of reprisal or revenge or of any kind, right? They're not going to lose their jobs because they talked about something they saw or somebody, right? So that these are the readings for this week. Now, we have some wonderful videos again for this week, and we have, for example, for chapter 4, okay, let me see, did I skip? I think I may have skipped something here. Okay, yeah, We have a video on charismatic and transformational approaches. This is a really good video. Um, for example, the videos on charismatic leadership, and it speaks to the importance of understanding what charismatic, why leaders are charismatic, why we follow certain people, but it also makes a reference to the potential dangers, if you will, of charismatic leadership, because sometimes we can be led by individuals who are just very, very charismatic. I mean, they're just, they're very eloquent speakers, or just physically imposing figures, or beautiful people, and we sometimes tend to get carried away. So there is a note on that. Then, of course, there's a video on transactional versus transformational leadership, and this one is really good because it makes very, very detailed comparisons, and we'll talk about some of those today. Then we have a video on followership, which is very important. Okay, and this is and let me say something about followership. Again, this idea of not thinking about leadership solely as something that comes from the top down is very important if we are to understand leadership in its full dimension, because followers are just as much leaders as leaders. If you don't believe me, ask Tom Brady. Just think about what Tom Brady would say to you if you asked him how important his offensive line for the many years he played with the Patriots, how important they were, and how important his receivers were, and how important the training staff, and etc. Right? But specifically that offensive line, who gelled and who knew Tom Brady and how he played and what his plays and all, but they were leaders because they were great followers. They created a great amount. They created value to the organization, to the Patriots football team, because of their ability to be great followers. They understood their role. They understood their objective. They understood what was the important part of their game, of the game, and for them, how they fit in that. And they listened, and they were great followers, and that's what made them leaders in a sense, because what they are doing is they are essentially adding value. They are also inspiring others to be better. They're allowing others to succeed. They're allowing others to shine, and that's not easy thing to do for these big guys, right? The linemen. Nobody. They're not sexy or anything, right? But they're the most important. They are the most important. The offensive line and the defensive line, as the saying goes, it's in the trenches that you win football games. And these guys are paramount in importance. And their sacrifice, if you will, to the victory is what makes them great leaders. And so an example of followership, where leadership through followership is certainly important, and we cannot overlook that very, very important element of leadership. Okay, so that's on followership. And then we have what if self-leadership? So there's, that's an interesting concept in and of itself. And then self-managing teams, you might want to check this one out. It's interesting. How can this work in offices, crisis situations, and groups? So this one might be very interesting. And then you have traditional leadership versus network leadership. And we have seen a kind of a change in a paradigm shift over the last 20, 30 years, because now we are network driven. Just the nature of businesses and social media and the internet has kind of forced us into more network driven management and leadership approaches, where we are no longer just managing things in one dimension. Now we are managing things in 2 and 3 dimensions. Okay, so, and of course, all of the networks that go into play, for example, when we think about just one process, like, for example, driver's licenses. How does DNV or, say, In Indiana, it's BMV. How does the Bureau of Motor Vehicles ensure the best service and efficient and effective service for the client, for the user, for the citizen? Well, there's many different things that have to be worked at the same time, and because of the way that you maximize, right, the way that you maximize value in today's world is through technology. This is how we become more effective, more efficient, cost effective, certainly, and time effective and time efficient. And so it's important that we understand network and where leadership, what role leadership plays in that. There's a concept called network driven leadership, which is leadership power that comes from the ability of one to understand and use the network to add value to a process or to the institution. Okay, so an important concept there as well. All right, for the multimedia introduction overview for this week, you are to identify leadership theories from weeks 1 and 2 that would fit into various timelines of the scenario you are developing. So the crisis scenario that you developed in week 1. And you identify a minimum of at least 2 theories that would apply to the 3-minute leader, 2 theories that apply to the 3-hour leader, 2 that apply to the 3-day leader, and 2 that apply to the 3-month leader, okay? So this is your multimedia introduction overview. Now, a word on the Prezi video, okay? You are to develop a 3 to 5 minute Prezi video presentation. In this one, please keep in mind that you are in the video with graphic information coming in and out of the screen around you. So kind of like what I did now. So you might say, that you're talking about a leadership concept, and then you click on the slide, and you might talk a little bit, So also remember that you can sign up for a free Prezi video account using your university email address, okay? So do keep that in mind. And so it won't cost you anything, so that's good. And then, but do remember again to please use a little bit of video options, coming in and out. You can do this, or you can be in the corner while the graphics are on there. Just something that's kind of cool and that catches the viewer's eye, and it's it's a professional type presentation. Okay, all right. Now, last note on, well, actually not quite the last one, but the content. What is the content for this one? Describe the scenario and present the theories you've selected to use in each segment of the crisis. Present a minimum of at least 2 theories that would apply to the 3-minute, 3-hour, 3-day, 3-month, and then provide. I think I actually repeated this one, so my apologies. Okay, the video must have at least 1 segment with just you in the frame, 1 segment with you and the slides, and then 1 segment with just the slide. Okay, so for example, one that looks just like this one, right? Just the slide. And then one where it's just, let's see, one that it looks like this. Okay, so this one would be you and the slides, and then the other one would be just me. You see? So this is just me. So I'm talking, whatever, and then you say, okay, let's take a look at the crisis. So you click on, and there you have it, right? You might want to first just kind of, well, you'll figure it out. But the idea is to have one with just you, one with slides, and then one with the entire slide as a presentation. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that you knew that. All right, now for the multimedia discussion responses. So these are the responses that you provide to your colleagues. All right, You guys work very hard on these things. They're beautiful videos and they're great presentations, and you guys have tremendous skills and great voices. I love to hear some of your voices are very, very just, talking about charismatic leadership. Some of you are charismatic leaders because you just have tremendous voices. Believe me, the power of a soothing or an inspiring voice is tremendous. It's really important, and so I do enjoy listening to some of your presentations. So, but give me more, okay, or give your colleagues more, I should say. Don't just don't just respond with that was a really neat video, okay, or I really like the way you presented that. That's for undergraduate and maybe not even that, okay. It's very superficial. This is graduate level, and so we can say a lot more, okay. Something you liked about their presentation style or technique. Other additional resources might be for the second post. Other additional resources or ideas that help them further develop their ideas, okay. So, get creative, put a little bit of time into it and effort, and you're doing it. But a reminder, because sometimes I know we are out of time and we're pressed for time, and so we trying just to meet the requirement, but we forget about the quality and the content. Okay. All right. So this is the first part of today's lecture on kind of the logistics. Now, let's talk a little bit about some of the actual theories. Okay. So leadership styles. Some of these we've covered already in week 1, and now in this week you'll cover them. So, for example, we talked about laissez-faire leadership. Okay. Now, the one thing about laissez-faire leadership, laissez-faire is a French term that means leave alone or let alone. And it's used in the economics theory and economics, it's used to describe what Adam Smith suggested that government should do with markets. Governments should leave markets alone and let the market determine supply and demand, prices, etc. Now, this term laissez-faire, and I'll be honest here, I don't like the term laissez-faire to describe this type of leadership style because it gives laissez-faire a negative connotation, which I think is unfair. And it's not quite the same spirit of laissez-faire. Laissez-faire is leave alone so that the market can work its magic, whereas laissez-faire style leadership is more like absent leadership. And these are two different things, right? Letting somebody do their thing as opposed to not having been there in the first place are two different things, okay? So I do have a little bit of a problem with the term. Nevertheless, it is the term. Now, is it always negative? We'll talk about that here in a minute, okay? But one of the things about laissez-faire, one of the problems with laissez-faire is that if there isn't a coaching and training and clarity in the direction and the instructions, it can be disastrous. And in fact, it can lead to poor group cohesion because people have no idea what they're doing. Everybody's kind of asking each other. Think about, just picture this. 5, 6, 7 people, and there's no leader, there is no mentor, there is no coach, and you're trying to figure out what to do, and then everybody begins to pull at different directions, and so it results in poor group cohesion. Okay, laissez-faire provides little or no accountability. It's the type of leadership style where when something goes right, there's the leader. Well, I shouldn't say the leader. There's the so-called leader or the person in charge, I should say, to take all the credit, right? Oh, yes, of course, this is my team and I led them to do this and that. But the minute that something goes wrong, it's their fault. It's not my fault, You did it wrong. And here comes, the minute something goes wrong, the minute the train goes off the rails, that's when the absent leader all of a sudden is there. Okay, that's laissez-faire style leadership. In many situations, laissez-faire style leadership results in burnout. Burnout is a very, very important concept that we study in organizational behavior, especially, but also in leadership. And it's real. And, the word burnout is kind of like a match, right? You turn on a match, you strike a match, and it burns, and then it extinguishes itself. Well, that metaphor, that analogy, I don't know which one it is, but you can think about it. It's not just the burning out emotionally and mentally because of, say, stress, but there's also burnout that comes about from a lack of leadership, from a lack of the right style of leadership. If you have a dictatorial boss, that can lead to burnout because you just simply cannot stand being at work. If you have, on the other hand, a laissez-faire boss that's absent, there's no boss, so you don't have to worry about running into the boss. But the problem is there is no boss. And so there is no boss to tell you what to do, to help you solve problems, to lead you in the right direction. That can be a huge source of personal stress and anxiety, which leads to burnout. And when there is nobody accountable, then it also leads to burnout because you begin to take on certain risks and certain actions that may be detrimental to you in at the end. Okay, so can really result in burnout. Laissez-faire leadership is reactive rather than preventive, and this is a problem when you start thinking about strategic leadership. When you think about strategic leadership or leaders that are strategic, what is ultimately strategic leadership? It's one thing. It's risk management, and it's having a vision. That's what being strategic means, is that you lead understanding risks. And if you are an absent leader, how could you possibly manage risk, right? And so what ends up happening is you end up becoming reactive. You react to problems. You react when things go wrong. You react when the policy didn't achieve its desired outcome, or you react when the goals of the organization were not met, right? Instead of preventing, instead of being strategic, instead of analyzing scenarios and the risks of each of the scenarios, okay? So you end up doing damage control. And once you're in damage control, it's over, okay? The damage it's like spilled milk. There's nothing you can do, right? And in politics and government, damage control can mean the end of your career, all right? And we know, we have seen this firsthand with presidents, current presidents and former presidents, how damaging this can be if you don't lead, and if you don't create an organizational culture that is built on being strategic and preventing rather than just reacting, right? Especially when we think about, for example, the foreign policy sector. We have seen some things, right, recently in foreign policy that have led to, very unfortunate situations, and part of it might have been the fault, or I don't want to say the fault, but the caused by or a result of a lack of strategic and leadership and perhaps even laissez-faire leadership. Okay. All right. So this is laissez-faire leadership. Now we have democratic versus autocratic, and then also charismatic. All right. So these are different leadership styles. All of them really important and very useful, but they are all, well, actually, not all very useful. I should say the democratic and the autocratic are very useful. Sorry. I'm skipping one. The democratic, very useful. The autocratic, very useful. But there is one point to be made there. And then the charismatic, also very useful. But there's also a point to be made about the charismatic as well. So here are the points that I wanted to make. Okay, for the charismatic leadership, it's all about, why do I follow that person? Why do I follow her? Okay? What is it about her that just makes me want to follow her? Okay? Or follow him? All right? Why did people follow a person like Martin Luther King, Dr. King, or Nelson Mandela, or Gandhi, or other characters that we have here, right? Che Guevara, who is Ernesto Che Guevara, is the famous revolutionary, right, from Bolivia, who became famous because of his participation in the Cuban Revolution, right? So, and people like, there's I believe this is Yasser Arafat at the bottom. So why do people follow certain people? Well, there's many reasons, but a lot of it has to do with charisma. There's something about that person that just makes people want to follow them. The way they talk, their message, their vision, the way that they make sense of things, they create meaning, they offer a purpose. Okay, people see something that's greater than themselves in this person. All right, and it's very powerful. It's it's a very powerful. It's almost like a drug for some people. They just they go blind and they just follow this person blindly, and that can be dangerous, right? We have seen examples in history of great charismatic leaders who have led humanity into the most horrible of places, right? Adolf Hitler being one of the most important examples, right? Of a person who was a great orator, a great communicator, could move masses, could get people to do basically anything he wanted, using certain multiple different strategies. Some of them obviously coercion and threats, etc. But at the end of the day, he did manage to get people to do horrible things, right? In the name of a belief and a philosophy, and so charismatic leadership, while very, very powerful, can also it's something that needs to be handled because it can be dangerous. Now, democratic versus autocratic, and here's a point about these two. Okay, neither one in its full dimension is desired. At least not in every situation. Okay, if you are in a battlefield, right, are you going to evoke a democratic leadership style, right? I've never been in combat, but I'm sure some of you have, and you can speak to this, right? Did the sergeant ask everybody what, the platoon, well, actually the teams, right? The platoon leader would ask the sergeant, but would the platoon leader, the lieutenant, would he ask, the different teams, what do you all think? So let's go down the line and have everybody tell me what they think we ought to do here. Okay, that's ridiculous. Again, it doesn't seem like that's the right approach. If you have to make a split-second decision that's going to determine the success or failure of a mission, right? Or if you have to save someone's life, or if a fellow soldier went down, right? You have to make certain calls that require autocratic leadership. And so the lesson here is that autocratic leadership, not to be confused with authoritarian leadership. Autocratic leadership is a leadership that is top down when the situation calls for it. But the difference between autocratic and authoritarian is that autocratic leaders are legitimate leaders. Authoritarian leaders seldom are legitimate. They are usually dictators, they are usually despots, they are usually tyrants who have run out of legitimacy, who are no longer legitimate, whose people don't want to follow them and want them out, but they remain there because of force. They are there by force. They are there by coercion, by manipulation. Okay, so that's the difference between authoritarian and autocratic, which should not be confused. All right, democratic leadership is great for certain situations that demand a more robust and broader set of alternatives, for example. So if we had to discuss invading country A versus negotiating with country A, that might be an opportunity for democratic leadership, because you want to have all the voices, the ones that are in favor and against. You want to hear everyone before you make a decision like that. So in that situation, democratic leadership is probably desired, but it's not in every situation. So it doesn't mean that you are undemocratic. It just means that sometimes somebody needs to make the call, and it cannot be everybody. It's like the football coach asking all of his players, "What do you think we should do? What kind of play should we call?" Right? That just doesn't happen, or likely will not lead to the outcome you want. I mean, somebody has to make the call, and so democratic leadership not appropriate in every situation, just like autocratic leadership is sometimes appropriate in certain situations. All right, now transformational versus transactional. Now these are really, really important leadership styles. And we talked a little bit about transformational already, but let's talk a little bit about transactional first here before we go back to transformational. So the idea here comes about. This is Bernard Bass, and he came up with these leadership styles. He was he's an expert in this field, and if you think about if you start with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Okay, Abraham Maslow was a psychologist who came up with the Maslow's pyramid, right? If you've seen it, probably it's a pyramid with needs. At the bottom, you have physiological, you have security, you have belonging, etc., all the way to self-realization. So it's like 5 pillars, not pillars, but they're segments, sections of the pyramid all the way to the top. So the idea is based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it's essentially this, that transformational leadership speaks to the upper level needs. So when individuals, when your subordinates, when your followers are seeking or are in a position to seek needs that have to do with self-actualization or self-esteem or belonging, all right? These, when individuals, when your group, when your team, when your subordinates are in that position, they already have met these lower tier needs, and now they're looking for something more. They want to make a name for themselves. They want to achieve, do something for humanity, do something for an institution, do something for their as a legacy, right? It's no longer salary or position. It's more, what am I going to do now at the end of my career? Okay, what is the legacy that I want to leave behind? So transformational leadership speaks more to these levels of needs than transactional leadership, which speaks more to the lower needs, the physiological, security, and recognition. So physiological and security, actually it's physiological and security more so, but physiological needs are basically your survival: water, food, shelter. Okay, think about and this is not as prevalent in the United States as it is in Latin America, countries like Mexico and Nicaragua, and in Asia, in developing nations, but especially Latin America. When you have a workforce whose needs are generally not met, the bottom needs, the physiological needs, the security needs, okay? A lot of these individuals don't know what they're going to eat the next day. A lot of these individuals don't have a safe home to sleep in, or a warm house to have them and their children sleep in, right? So how can you possibly lead, inspire, motivate, and manage a worker who is only thinking about what she or he is going to eat tomorrow? And is somebody going to come into their house and rape them? I mean, these are horrific situations that some of these individuals live in. So as a leader, as a manager of human resources, you have to understand where your individuals find themselves and apply the appropriate leadership style based on the needs of the individuals, right? So you're not going to be talking about grandeur, right? Visions of grandeur to somebody, visions of grandeur. I don't mean to sound, cynical, but you're not going to be talking about the greatness of, Dow Chemical or the greatness of the government when the individual has nothing to eat and is only looking out to how much am I going to make? How much are you going to pay me? And when do you pay me so that I can go buy food to feed my family? And will I be able to buy clothing and deodorant so that I don't smell bad when I get to work? I mean, it's that the needs are that basic. So these are transformational leadership situations, right? Where you are going to as a leader, you are going to motivate individuals who find themselves in these places in the pyramid. You motivate them with transactional motivating factors. Now, transactional. One good thing about the transactional leadership style is that it's even though it's a stick and carrot, right? Stick and carrot in the sense that you don't do this right, I fire you. You don't take the, if, for example, a football coach gives somebody an instruction, and if they don't do it right, you bench them, okay? That's stick and carrot, right? But at the same time, if the player does the right thing, he might get a bonus, so he might, or if a civil servant, right, a worker in a local government agency, you might tell the worker, go and deliver these 3,000 flyers for our campaign, and if you do that correctly. But transactional leadership is results driven, and that is an important element, especially now. Results driven is important for management, right? We know that managers have to meet deadlines, they have to meet specifications, orders, and results, right? Management is all about results, and so this is why management and transactional leadership kind of merge, and they in many ways they mirror. It's almost like transactional leadership is almost synonymous with management. Now, it doesn't mean that managers should not be transformational. Absolutely not. Managers should be transformational. They should strive to be transformational. But the point is that transactional leadership has a place in the organization when it calls for it, depending on the situation, depending on the maturity level of the workers, depending on the needs, especially on the needs of the workers. Okay? Transformational leadership is all about idealized influence, right? So how do I influence these individuals, and every individual separately? Every individual is its own person, right? His own person, her own person. So what do I do? What do I have to do to stimulate that one person, right? If you are, today's workforce, we have 5-6 different generations working together, right? We have the folks that are in their 70s who are the generation from World War II, right? That's the lost generation. Then we have Generation X, which is your servant here, and then we have Generation Millennials, right? And the Generation Z, I believe, and Y. I mean, all these different generations. But each of these different generations, they kind of see the world differently, and they react to things differently, and they have a different way of approaching problems and solving them. So as a leader if you have to manage all of these different generations, these different styles and personalities and worldviews, right? If in some ways, how do you do that? And the way that you do that is by idealized influence and by managing every person differently. Okay. Also important in transformational leadership is the intellectual stimulation part. And, this is important because uh, if you only stay at the transactional level, you're not going to extract the value from the person as much as you could, right? The way that you empower individuals in the team, in the organization, is by stimulating them, and intellectual stimulation is a way of doing that, right? You ask people, what do you think, right? Present them with a scenario. Begin to share with them a little bit more about the organization, maybe the organizational goals, maybe how does the organization link to the greater organism, right? If you are working in local government, well, local government is within the county of Orange County, and Orange County is, California. So you begin to make these connections so that they begin to see themselves as part of a greater thing. This is intellectual stimulation. It's important also to empower individuals to be creative and to have a vision, and to promote that vision, and to share that vision so that others can also tap into it. And the way that you do that is by being passionate. Okay, being passionate. All right. It's it doesn't have you don't have to be an eloquent speaker, but simply by being there every time when you're needed, and you're the first one there on the job and you're the last one to leave, and you work with dedication and you devote all of your time and energy to your work and to the people that you serve, that will inspire others. That's passion, right? Many jobs in public service, nobody goes into public service to get rich, right? At least they shouldn't. But we do things because we are passionate about serving people and helping others and making a difference. Well, that's the passion that needs to come through, and that should come through if you are a transformational leader. Okay? Now, to close out today's lecture, let me close out with servant leadership and some lessons from the greatest leader, right, of all time, and Jesus Christ. So some servant leadership lessons from Jesus. I mean, if we think about servant leadership, I think, for me at least, the first person I think about is Jesus, of course. Many other servant leaders in history, certainly, over the ages have come about, right? And in our contemporary times, in our recent times, also great servant leaders that we say, wow, you people that inspire you because of their service. Okay, so some of the lessons from Jesus. All right, be confident but humble. All right, and you can find in Scripture, all of these, right? Scriptures and that speak to this, right? That embody these ideas, right? I'm certainly not an expert, but be confident but humble. Okay, humility is a lesson that Jesus teaches us, right? Jesus didn't preach and serve and help others by being imposing his will and making people do things. No, he was humble, and that humility is what inspired others to listen to him and to follow him. It also scared some and was a threat to others, as we know, right? Do not promote yourself, right? Do not promote yourself. Only God is going to exalt you, right? So those individuals that don't promote themselves and let their actions do the talking are servant leaders, right? There is no arrogance. There is no look at me, right? It's let my actions serve as the catalyst for my followers to see what I'm about. Okay, so do not promote yourself, and let others promote you. Let others be the ones who recognize you, right? And if you are a servant leader, it will happen. It's just a matter of time. Don't rule over, but govern. All right, and two, distinctions, especially in the public sector, right? Certainly in Latin America and in other countries where dictatorial regimes are more the norm than the exception, but you know, governing is very different than ruling over. And unfortunately, that's what many individuals do in countries like Nicaragua, for example. So don't rule over, but rather govern. And the how do you govern? You govern by the supremacy of the law and not the supremacy of the will of a certain group, right? The supremacy of the law, the institutionality of government. So it's not just having institutions, but are they independent? Are they transparent? And are they doing what the laws and the Constitution and the people expect them to do, right? Don't take the best place, right? This I know there's proverb somewhere in the Bible about this, but don't take the best place, right? If you walk into if you walk into somewhere, don't be ask for the best seat in the house, right? If you come into a guest, right, somebody like some guest has you over for dinner, are you going to go and sit at the head of the table, right? You don't do that, because out of respect for the guest, for the owner of the home, or the host, you let the host decide, and you also don't sit next to the host, right? Because that would show what? It would show arrogance. It would show that you believe that you are perhaps more important than you really are. And now that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be confident and that you shouldn't have self-worth. But if you are in fact worth that, believe me, the host, your team, the institution, the organization will take care of seating you where you should be seated, okay? Lead by ethical example. Lead by example, ethical behavior, okay? So it's not just talking the talk, but walking the walk, all right? So, this, we know that, for example, I lost my train of thought, but when individuals are harassed, for example, like sexual harassment in the workforce, in the workplace, in an organization, right? You can't talk about that and be one of the culprits that is acting inappropriately, right, with certain members of the opposite sex or whomever, right? So you got to lead by example, right? The example is going to serve as the vehicle, the mechanism for others to do what you do. Because, how do you make culture in an organization, and how do you change culture in an organization? It likely comes from the top down, and it doesn't mean that the bottom can't do it. It means the bottom is expecting and waiting for the top to give them the signal, to give them the opening, right? And so you are in that position of power and authority that you need to be the one to give the correct example, right? And then the last thing I want to say here is that being a servant leader is not tantamount to being a servant in the sense of like being a maid or a slave. And I say this because, I've discussed servant leadership with some of my colleagues, not in California Baptist, but in other places. And there's this misconception that servant leaders or servant leadership is about you being a servant of others. And in fact, I even recall a colleague saying, "I'm nobody's servant." And I said, you're misunderstanding servant leadership. Servant leadership says nothing about you being anybody's servant. It says everything about you being a servant, a servant person first, where service becomes your first priority and leadership follows. Leadership comes about from it. It is the result of your service. That's what servant leadership is. So I serve you, my students, in the best way I can through enlightening you, sharing knowledge, helping you succeed. That's how I serve you. I am not your servant, but I serve you. And I serve the institution that where you and I are in, California Baptist. I serve them not as a servant of them per se, but as me serving their institution in providing a top quality product for the institution. And I serve the greater academic institution, the institution of academia, in promoting and forging and creating future leaders and leaders that are qualified to be public administration professionals with graduate degrees. So you see, it's about who you serve, but not necessarily as a servant role where you are a maid or a slave. And nothing wrong with being a maid. Just it's not the concept, it's not the ideas, it's not the same spirit. Okay, you are serving something that is greater than you, and through service is how you achieve leadership, is how you emanate leadership, because your service will speak for you. You don't have to do anything. You just continue serving, and you will see how others will be inspired to follow you, okay, as they did Jesus Christ. Okay, all right, folks. I hope you enjoyed this little longer than usual presentation, but I hope it was enjoying, and I can't, I no longer can't speak. Enjoyable, I should say. Enjoy the week. Thank you very much, and God bless you all. Okay, take care.